For those of you joining us, the topic of conversation today is sudden blindness and dealing with from kind of A to Z, rebuilding life after that, and the various services that the Helen Keller Network provides in order to walk through each step of that process. Philip will be sharing his experiences today, his personal experience, and Marcia will be helping fill in a lot of what we want to know about the specific services that are provided in order to aid that experience. So let's hop right into it. Philip, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure, no problem. My name is Philip Duncan, everybody, and I'm a student at Helen Keller.
And Marcia?
And I'm Marcia Hamilton. I'm the vocational instructor, one of the vocational instructors, specifically for the team program, which Philip is a part of currently.
Duncan, everybody, and
great. Thank you so much for that. So again, I encourage anyone who's watching right now to feel free to ask any questions you might have throughout. But Philip, let's start with why don't you take us back several years and kind of walk us through your personal experience.
Sure. So personally, I had my vision my entire life, and back in 2010, I had a headache. It wouldn't go away, and that caused me to go to the doctor. And after a couple of days of having this headache, the doctor ran some tests, did a CAT scan, found out I had a brain tumor. But they just monitored it because they said there was no growth at the time. So they were just keeping a close look on everything, and had me coming in quite often, every so often, every couple of months for an MRI just to see what was going on. Finally, a year later, it grew, and they said the direction it was going in could cause me to go blind. So I had to do surgery, and that was in.
It's just, I could just give you a pause just real quick before. From the moment that you first learned of this diagnosis of a tumor, can you kind of just describe, just let me know what your life was like at that moment, like what you're doing professionally, and kind of like just give us a sense of what your life was like at that time?
Sure. So when I found out about this tumor in 2010, I was working for Geico full time. I was working in their no-fault medical department. But of course, it wasn't bothering me. I mean, I literally went to the doctor because this headache lasted maybe like 3 or 4 days, and it wouldn't go away. So so they just monitored it after they found out, and yes, I was doing that. I was also going to school to finish up my bachelor's, and I was also playing tennis, and pretty, kind of like semi, I would say I was playing tennis a lot, pretty much every day. So that was what I was doing at the time. So now a year later, when it did grow, and they said it could cause me to go blind if I didn't have surgery for it. I went in, I had the surgery, and I came out, and I was fine. I had my recovery, and at that time, the recovery state was, it was radiation. I did some radiation and just some basic recovery, and I was back to, I feel after maybe like a couple of months, I was back to, work and doing everything I was doing prior. And it brought me, now I was going fine. At that point.
So that moment, there was this initial scare, if you will, with this diagnosis. It was addressed medically, and at that point, it seems like you're. Do you feel like you're in the clear in that moment once you're kind of back in the rhythm of your life?
I would say so. And as a matter of fact, correction, I was not working at Geico at that time.
Gotcha.
I was working somewhere else. I believe it was for family residences. Dealing with assisting with disabled adults. I was a supervisor there. So that was at that time. Now, after going back to my life and continuing and everything was fine, this is now years later, 2016. I'm going for my follow-up because I continue to go for follow-ups every like 6 months. They started to push it out a little more. And now 2016, out of nowhere, this tumor came back. And now they said it was sitting on my optic nerve. And I had to go into emergency surgery that same day I found out.
Wow. So just at that moment, you weren't necessarily experiencing any symptoms. You were just, it was like a routine follow-up that you discovered that?
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. No symptoms at all. They were asking me if I was okay, what was I doing that day? And I literally told them, I said, I played tennis this morning. I went to work the day prior, and I said, you know, at that time, I was with Geico at the time. So now that's why I was like, okay, I really didn't understand. So I had to go for the surgery, and it took me into emergency surgery. And after coming out, I recovered in the hospital, and then I was released. And now after being released and at home recovering, maybe a couple of weeks in, I woke up one morning, and you know, you're in your house and it's normal with the lights off, you know where everything is at. So you're maneuvering your house and you're going, and you know, I went to the bathroom, I did my thing in the morning, and then that's when everyone was telling me in my house, they were like, how come you're not saying anything to me? And that's when I realized, like, after I told them to turn on the lights and they said it was on, I told them, I said, okay, I'm not seeing anything at all. And that was definitely a scary feeling. I think my knees kind of buckled, and I had to sit down for a little bit and just take everything in.
When you had gone in for the procedure, and by the way, just if you're joining us right now, I'm speaking with Philip Duncan and Marcia Hamilton. Marcia Hamilton is a vocational instructor at the Helen Keller Services for the Blind. Philip is a student there and is also walking through his experience of sudden blindness following a brain tumor procedure several years back. So Philip, at that moment that you realize that you can't see anything, I'm wondering, actually just prior to that, when you went in for the procedure, was that like brought up as a potential outcome or a potential risk of the procedure? Were you familiar with that as a possibility?
You know, I do believe so. I mean, that was always a concern, just with the tumor of itself and the surgery. They always talked about that was a possible result. But I mean, at the same time, I kind of feel like I went into the first surgery and came out and I was okay, and then I had the second surgery and I came out and I was okay, and now I'm home recovering. So I don't think anyone was pretty much thinking during that recovery that, you know, this was something that was going to happen.
Right.
I mean,
and sorry, how long was it into the recovery that day that you woke up?
I would say maybe 2.5 weeks.
Yeah. And otherwise you hadn't really experienced any symptoms like that? It was that sudden?
And it was just that sudden. And I mean, afterwards, after my family, my mother was here, and she was pretty much the main person helping me the most. And she called the hospital and told them. They rushed me in, and after, I would say after maybe I had one or two surgeries again after that, and they were able to get back some vision. So in actuality, it brought me to where I'm at today, and I'm thankful that I have some sort of vision.
And can you
So,
describe what, what your vision currently is? Can you describe that?
so my vision currently, I can make out distinct colors and objects, but it's still very blurry. So I'm still considered legally blind, like no driving and things like that. But I mean, if something is really close up, I can make it out. Kind of like, for example, like right now, I know I'm speaking to you. I can see there's the image of someone, but I don't know. I can't see the details of it.
Mm-hmm. So again, going back to that moment, you've woken up, you just realized that you can't see anything. You go through those couple procedures, you do get some of your vision back, but what's it like now at that moment, going back to, like, say, post those couple procedures that got the amount of vision that you have now? What is it like kind of re-entering your life, and describing like what it is that you no longer felt like you could do, and how, the first steps of trying to figure out how to move forward from that?
I'll be honest with you, at that moment, of course, very scary feeling, and I couldn't believe that I didn't have my vision, or my vision was partial even after they got back some of it. Of course, there's always the hope that I hope that it's going to come back. And even when I had the surgery, I was hoping that it was going to come back 100%, but it didn't. And it was really hard to deal with, being able to see your entire life. And then in the flash of the moment, it's like, boom, there goes your vision.
Mm.
It's really hard to deal with that sort of reality. So of course there was a lot of rehab, and a lot of I would say like a lot of therapy.
So let's just,
like,
as far as going like day one, what's day one like of like, because I imagine, like, I'm just thinking from my own experience, I guess I'm in a little bit of a different category because I've been speaking to people at the Helen Keller Services for the Blind and the National Center for quite a while now. But if I go back a couple years prior to, having any connection to the community, I certainly wouldn't know, where to turn or what to do. So how did you start to even learn about, where to seek help?
I would say, well, for me personally, I didn't know what to do or where to go. And I was very thankful that my mother was there at the time, and she was a nurse, so she had stopped working, and she was pretty much there helping me throughout this entire process. And she pretty much reached out to and did some research and reached out to Helen Keller and found Helen Keller for the Blind, and set it up where I was able to go and meet with them. I met with my commission counselor, Addie Hampton, and Addie Hampton pretty much set me up with everything, all the services. And the first step was the vision rehab, where I had a specialist, Lisa Crossan. Lisa was great. Her patience level is amazing. I have to just put that out there, because it wasn't easy dealing with me and my emotions, and some days wanting to do more and other days just wanting to be left alone.
So I want to pick up there in just a moment. And again, if you're joining us right now, we're speaking with Philip Duncan and Marcia Hamilton. Marcia is a vocational instructor at Helen Keller Services for the Blind. Philip is a student there, and he's taking us back several years to when he suddenly lost his vision after a brain tumor procedure, and kind of those initial steps of reorienting to the world. So we're right now at that step where you're just starting to learn about those initial services. So Marcia, I'd love to talk with you a moment. And again, Duncan, we're gonna, sorry, Philip, I keep calling you by your last name. We're gonna go back. We're gonna pick up from there and kind of walk through the rest of it. But Marcia, now's a good time. Could you just give us an overview from from the organization's services side of what it's like to have someone like Philip at that moment in time coming to the organization, having just gone blind and learning about kind of like how to move forward. Can you talk about the structure of the organization and
Sure.
how you field those people?
Sure. He mentioned that his mom, Mrs. Duncan, contacted the New York State Commission for the Blind. And that's the first step. And I have their phone number where they can be reached if anyone is in, need that service. So that's the first thing. And you're assigned to a counselor. He had Miss Addie Hampton. From there, should reach out to Helen Keller. And of course, the process begins, like he just mentioned, where he had vision rehab. And we have Lisa Crossan, who's amazing. He just mentioned that she's so patient in helping. Can you imagine losing your vision, not being able to move around in your own space, your own environment? So there's vision rehab. Then after the vision rehab, we have orientation and mobility. And that's with Sherry Wheatley, another very patient, wonderful member of our team, where you're now he had the opportunity to move safely within his home and his community. After that process, we have adjustment to blindness, and that's with Liz Sergi and Alana Garone. And that's the process, the first 3 steps in getting you comfortable, now accepting this new norm. So that's where we'll start. Philip can continue to tell you, what happened after that, because based on where the person is at emotionally, maybe they're ready to get back to work. So they'll, of course, be introduced to typing, ATC, foundation, other program that I will speak to later on. But the very first step is starting the process of being able to now live in this new environment. So it's vision rehab, orientation and mobility, and then adjustment to blindness.
Great. Thank you so much for that overview. And again, for those watching right now, please feel free, if you have any questions, write them in the comments section and we will try to address them throughout. So please feel free to ask any questions you might have, whether, excuse me, it's personal questions for Philip and his experience or more services questions for Marcia. We're happy to try to answer any questions that you might have. So let's go back to we're now at this step 1. Philip, you were starting to walk us through your personal experience of step 1. I imagine that, and from a little of the conversation we had the other day, I understand that like the entire world, it's a completely different experience at this moment when you're learning to kind of readjust to essentially what you could call almost like an entirely new world. Just that first step, I imagine just being in your home and navigating your home is that, can you kind of take me through that experience of like what it's like to kind of relearn your own space before you even go outside?
Yes, no problem. So I would say that in-home experience was tough. I had my mother, who was a nurse, and she was trying so hard to help as much as she could, and trying to get me acclimated to being at home. And it was still tough, having that such a major loss of vision and walking into things, learning how to cook, to use the bathroom, and just everything. It was tough, and I was glad that she took that step and reached out to Helen Keller, because meeting with Addie and her setting up these services and just everything in general, she was just great. And then the first step, like I said, was with Lisa Crossan, and Lisa came into the home, and she was definitely the rehab specialist that kind of helped me get acclimated to being at home again. And it was amazing when I think back to it now, because it's just like little things that you wouldn't even think of that made such a big difference. She definitely maneuvered and showed me where things were at, and gave me like a mobility cane, and we did a lot of mobility training in terms of that, with using the cane. And as far as now, like using appliances in the homes, something simple, she just put like bumper dots, these little sticky bumper dots on different things that, that you wouldn't even think of, something like that on the microwave that showed me what was the start and the stop button. Same thing with the stove. And just basic things that just made me get acclimated again to being at home and getting adjusted to life as a blind person.
Were there any other specific details of other than the bumper dots on certain objects or appliances? Did you like reorient your home in any different way, or did you set things up differently in your home as you were kind of relearning your space?
So I'll be honest with you. She did recommend maybe things can be moved around, but my mother was kind of a stickler and she said no. So, it was just a little more training that had to go into that.
That's fair. I gotta understand. There's always the interpersonal dynamics too, right? So it's not just when you're talking about a space and multiple people living there, it's always a negotiation, no matter what the situation.
Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. Things were okay. I mean, as far as my personal space, I was able to move things around and adjust it, but like for the major house appliances and rooms, those pretty much remained the same. So as far as just a little bit of detail in terms of things that she showed me is something like cooking. There were different like cooking utensils, maybe something like a double spatula. It was literally like, if you think of like a tong, it was something like that, but just on both ends is a spatula. And that was really helpful in terms of cooking. Another thing that was good was there's like, I don't even know what you call it, but it's basically like a little stick with a hook on it that allows you to pull the oven rack in and out. And that was something that was so simple but was so helpful at the same time. And my personal favorite was this little sensor. Now the sensor had two metal hooks on one end, and that hooks onto the cup. And as you pour the liquid in the cup, once the liquid fills up and touches the sensor, it beeps to notify you that it's to the right level, so it doesn't spill over. And and that works, especially when you're dealing with like making a cup of coffee, or especially. So those were like really little things for people that may not have vision issues, but for somebody with vision issues, that's a very big help.
Right. And I'm gonna just go to a couple questions that some of the viewers have right now. The first question is coming from Judith. It's a two-part question, but maybe we'll just focus on the first part right now, because we'll get to the second part in a little bit more detail shortly. But the first part of the question is, Philip, how long did it take to adjust mentally and emotionally after that initial shock of losing your vision? And speak a little bit more on, or if that's still part of the process for you.
To be honest with you, adjusting to it, I don't feel like it took me as long as, as maybe the statistics say. I mean, I had a really good support system, and that was pushing me. And that was a really big help in terms of that. Plus, for me and myself and the type of person I am, I wanted to get back out there and work. And, I was in the process of doing my master's, and I wanted to try to get back and see if I can get into that and get that done, which that's still it's still a process getting to there. But, as far as getting to this point where I'm at Helen Keller and being able to maneuver the computer and all the different things that they taught me it's been amazing, you know.
And
And I know for others looking in and seeing that, they're probably thinking like, wow, you know, it took me, you know, for me to get here. And I know for everyone it's different, but for me, I had a really good support system, I would say.
and as far as that support system, specifically, like what was the core of that support system?
The core of my support system was definitely my mother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for her being a nurse and working, and she stopped working to stay home and be with me 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, after everything in the hospital with me losing my vision, they talked to me about possibly going to like an agency where I would be living and getting the support that I needed. And my mother disagreed, and she said that she's going to be there and my family is going to be there and they're going to help me as much as I can. And she didn't want to put me in that position, and I really appreciate that.
I have another question here from one of our viewers. The question is for Philip. Do you feel any of your senses have sharpened because of your vision loss?
Absolutely. My definitely with the vision loss, I'm gonna say my hearing is amazing. I mean, I thought it was, but definitely when I actually went to the doctor and I had a hearing test, one of the doctors told me that he's been doing this for over 30 years, and he said he said I have like animal-like hearing.
Wow.
And it is, you know, pretty much in my house, my room is in the back of the house, and I'll tell you, I can hear when people pull up and their car doors are closing before they even come to the door. So absolutely, I would say the hearing is amazing.
Another question we have here, let me see. The question is from Barbara. What were you studying for your master's?
My master's, I was studying public administration. I got my bachelor's in that. The concentration field was information management. So I was working with public administration and going to John Jay at the time, which I got my bachelor's from them. And then I started to do a little work with them, but then I positioned to Excelsior College. And I was working with them online prior to me losing my vision.
So let's I'm going to take us back to, so we talked about reorienting, and we're going to just hold for just one moment for an interpreter switch here. Great, we're all set there. Excellent. So we talked about the ways in which you had to kind of relearn your own space. And you know, before, I'd love to talk about getting outside of the house and navigating the world outside of the house. But before we move there, Marcia, is there anything that you want to comment more on the services side of things, as far as, you know, that kind of that first step of relearning your own space?
I think Philip spoke so well to that. That we actually have someone who actually comes into the home to get the person rehabilitated in their own environment. After that, then we move to orientation and mobility, which is now focusing on helping you to move safely outside within the community. So that's the next step. So we're putting the building blocks down to independence. So we're starting at home, the community. Then we're going to move into other services, which will involve vocational training, foundations, which is really a holistic work program, which is going to concentrate now on self-career exploration and other areas. So we're ensuring that our students are completely prepared for the next step in their life.
So let's talk about that next step of getting out of the house and readjusting to life outside of the house. Philip, can you kind of go back to that kind of those first moments of you know, relearning the outside world and what your experience was like?
that experience, it was I feel like it was really an emotional experience to be able to get back outside and now start maneuvering around and getting used to my environment now from a different look, without having my vision. And I would have to say that was also Lisa Crossan that helped me with that. So from the Vision Rehab in-house, we then transitioned to the mobility aspect, and we started to do a little bit of things outside. She showed me how to use the cane and the walking cane and navigate the stairs, as well as we took some walks around the block.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was really simple things. It was simple, but it was very helpful. And then from the walking up and down outside and maybe the backyard and the stairs, then we actually started to transition into other things like going to Helen Keller now, and I'm actually coming inside and meeting with everyone there and taking the SCAT bus. So it was a heavy experience for me. Still, it still kind of gets me, at that point, just when she said we were going to be going outside, I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm getting back to this point, after so long of being between the hospital and home, all this rehab. Now I'm to this point where I'm actually going to Helen Keller, and it was a good experience, though.
Did you feel, as far as like when you're starting to navigate, you're now at this point, you've learned how to use a cane and you're navigating the outside world. What's it like? I mean, I'm just thinking, like, I'm wondering what it's like to like cross the street for the first time and not being able to necessarily really see the traffic coming or things like that. Do you feel at that point that you're like confident and like really know how to do that? Or there's still kind of initial fears of like, what if a car is coming or things like that? What's that like?
I'll be honest with you. Even after all this time, I'm still not comfortable crossing the street.
Mm-hmm.
I have all the teaching towards it, and Lisa showed me, and just to, especially you're using your senses, you're listening, and the lights, and it's still tough because you never know, even though it may say the light is red, you don't know if someone's running the light, and you don't know if someone's riding a bike, or you never know what's happening. So I'm still a little uncomfortable with crossing the street. So I just kind of try to limit those environments where I have to cross the street. It's good when now personally, it's good taking like the SCAT bus, because they take you to and from your destination. I mean, so it limits you having to walk and cross the street in terms of that.
And just to clarify, is that you're saying that's called the SCAT bus? Is that correct?
It's transportation.
Right. And
Transportation.
Can you just describe, just for those who maybe aren't familiar, what that is?
It's so the SCAT bus for Suffolk County, it's called SCAT, SCAT, and it's basically a bus for people with disabilities, or maybe the seniors, things like that. It's not too bad. They take you to and from your destination. Now, that's specifically only for Suffolk County. I believe Nassau has their own ride service, which is called Able Ride.
Right. Okay.
And then I think the boroughs have Access a Ride.
I see. So it's one of several different transportation services depending on where you're located.
Yes.
So I actually have another question that's pretty related here to the topic, and the question is from Matthew, and it is for Philip. Do you welcome assistance from people you don't know when you're outside, in stores, etc., or is that uncomfortable for you?
So it depends on what type of assistance. Sometimes, I mean, of course, you have people that want to try to help you. Oh, take my hand and let me walk you to the aisle. And that I pretty much, I try not to do that too much.
Mhm.
But if someone's guiding me and tells me like, okay, you could follow me to maybe like the deli section, and I can do that because I can see the image. So I would prefer to do that. I would tell them to walk in front of me, and I would just follow them that way.
Mm. Is there ever a time, say, where you're crossing a street and someone kind of like unprompted comes up and and like without necessarily like asking kind of helps you? Does something like that ever happen where someone's kind of, or is it usually someone, you know, or how often does someone even ask you if you need help unprompted? I'm wondering.
Well, I guess it's based on where you're at, and you know, I've had it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked me to help, but as far as people just doing it, I haven't really had too much of that.
Mm-hmm.
Someone just like helping me without asking. Most of the time, people will ask. They're kind of, I feel like they're kind of nervous
Mm-hmm.
to assist in that sense. So I haven't really had too much of it, but people do. They ask, and I feel like I feel like the community and they're very open to helping you, especially when they see the cane, they see you maneuvering. They're very willing to, oh, let me assist you with the door, or maybe getting something off the shelf at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
So I've even had someone helping me put groceries in the car, not even thinking that my mom was in the store. They're just still helping me
Mm-hmm.
to load the groceries. So,
So
it all depends.
So let's go to again. We walked through, you know, what it was like to first lose your vision, to have that first step of people coming into your home and helping you re-navigate your physical space. Then that next step of mobility, of getting outside, learning to use a cane, learning to cross the street and navigate the world outside. Now we're at that step of you coming into the center, and I'd love to go to you, Marcia, for a moment of just kind of describing what this step is and what that looks like.
Okay. Well, we have adjustment to blindness, and here we're helping the individual emotionally. Sometimes it's in an individual level, or it could be in a group setting where you get a chance to talk about how are you handling your adjustment. And we have social workers who are equipped and ready and extremely caring and patient to help you through this process. After that, we also have a program called Foundation, which is also structured to concentrate on self-exploration, career. For example, Philip was in the middle of school. So more than likely, he would want to, if he wished to go continue on to college,
Mm-hmm.
based on, whatever the needs are. We have services where we start prepare them for that. But the main thing is to help the person to become self-aware, to get ready. Are you going to go back to work? Are you going to go back to school? Just to be able to live life normally. So we have these services in place at Helen Keller Services for them.
And just to, Philip described that, Philip, you described that you had a really good support system, anchored specifically in your mom. I'm wondering, Marcia, from your side of things, I'm sure you get quite a spectrum of people coming in, quite a spectrum of where they're at emotionally, the support systems they have. Can you just give us a sense of what that looks like, and maybe give a sense of people who may not have as strong of a support system as Philip initially, and what that's like fielding those people as well?
Well, we have first of all, Philip has a counselor. They're assigned a commission for the blind counselor who's there with them every step of the way and will provide all the services they will need. There's a social worker who's also assigned to them. So there are varying services that are provided. So there's a lot of support. So if you do not have personal support at home, you can count on Helen Keller. And what I find, we become like a second family to our student. They can call us at any time. We have services for them that, just to make sure that they have the support they need to move on to the next level. This is what makes our program so unique and so special.
So now, again, we're at the step where, we've covered in-home and mobility outside in the world. We're at the center. So Philip, what kind of, once you started regularly attending, what were you doing there, and what were you learning? What was the continued education there?
So the first thing I did when I came into Helen Keller after getting some training at home was I attended this group called Adjustment to Blindness.
Mm-hmm.
And that was with Alana Barone and Liz Sergi. And I believe they're the social workers. They were great as well. Very helpful. And basically that it wasn't a big group. It was a small group, but everyone was getting adjusted to losing their vision in whichever way their situation took them. And it was really it was good, hearing other stories and hearing how everyone else was dealing with it, or maybe the challenges someone was having, and it gave me motivation to say, like, you know what, my situation, even though it's similar, at least I have some vision. Maybe I have a little more vision, excuse me, than others. So it was a good group, and they also gave us some skills, towards helping us to cope, emotionally, especially.
So in addition to the actual services being provided there was something, kind of like a built-in support system, and starting to meet other people that were in a similar position to you and getting to connect with them. Exactly. Yeah. And just on that note, I'm curious, I imagine, now at this stage, of our conversation, you're, it's still fairly fresh, fairly new for you, but you've also gone through some of the stages and acclimated a little bit more. But I'm wondering what is it like with former relationships that you had with, like, friends and people in your life prior to losing your vision, and then at this stage, do you feel like a lot of people, like, you were still close with some people, or do you feel like it was harder for you to connect with other people afterwards, or how would you describe that experience?
In terms of friends and family, I mean, I still connect with some people. I feel like the relationships, some of them are a little more distant, and I think that's just based on maybe the educational aspect of them not knowing how to deal with it, and I think that's the hardest thing for them, per se. But I still try to connect with old friends and distant family members, and but the relationships, some are there, some are not. I would definitely say it's not the same, though. It's not the same. It was kind of, some of them, I felt like, it was even like, what's the word I could use? Like basically like starting a relationship all over again, them getting to know me, and me just explaining to them that, me losing my vision doesn't change who I am. It just changes how I look at things.
Do you feel, have you felt the times where you've really needed to, like, almost make other people feel comfortable with your like, being blind, people who knew you before that? Like, do you feel like you've had to speak to their discomfort almost?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would definitely say for some people, I feel like I've had to make them feel more comfortable than me getting comfortable.
So, Marcia, please let me know if I'm skipping any steps here, but, I'd love to get to the part where, your class, Marcia, and Philip being a part of your class. That's your direct connection to each other.
Okay.
Could you tell us in detail about what that class is that you are an instructor for, and walk us through that?
Sure. And before I get to that, let me just interject here that
Please.
Philip mentioned the groups.
Mm-hmm.
I was blessed to get a group of students from that group foundation,
Mm-hmm.
where they all met in the group where they work on adjustment to blindness.
Mm-hmm.
And they have such a tight bond that they're like family. So it's amazing to work with this group of people. They care so much about each other. Lunchtime, it's like a potluck meal at lunchtime. So it's amazing the relationships and the friendships that have developed out of these programs, and especially out of a program called Foundation, which is the program where they're dealing with social aspect of their lives and getting ready for vocational skills.
Right.
Out of that group, I inherited the most amazing group of people, and they're now in a program called TEAM, which is Technology, Employment, Achievement, and Mastery. It is a work readiness program where they're gaining computerized skills, customer service skills to prepare them for the world of work. And it's amazing. They are a phenomenal group of people. Even during this time of Corona, we're having classes on Zoom, and you can understand we're just using audio, and they do not miss a session, and we're having an amazing time. They're so motivated, hardworking, and I have all the confidence in the world that they're all going to go off to work at the end of this program.
That's amazing. So let's talk about that. Obviously it's hard to have a conversation these days without talking about COVID. It's something that's obviously affecting all of us in every aspect of our lives. So on that topic, Philip, if you'd like to start, how has COVID affected your life personally, and also in the context of being in class?
So as far as COVID, I would say personally and in class, I mean, just connecting the two, I would just say it mainly affected me by just being able to get out the house. Being able to go to program 2-3 times a week and attend this team program, and as well as the friends that I met at Helen Keller and became close with. We also get together from time to time and do different things. And that's from maybe bowling to just having dinner, or, so I would just say in that aspect. But as far as the being at home aspect, I mean, it's not affecting me too bad, because it's the norm for me. I'm at home most of the time, aside from just dealing with Helen Keller.
So it's mainly just actually physically attending the center, and also those occasional meetups with those like social meetups are the primary ways. And Marcia, you were just talking about this, but what's it been like on the services side to have to move everything virtually? I mean, you explained that everyone's really not missing a beat and really adjusting really well. But is there anything else you'd like to say about even just the process of having to pivot to everything virtually, or anything else around that topic?
Well, it was a major adjustment, because in the beginning, we basically just had to do reviews to make sure everybody was acclimated to a whole new environment, Zoom, not having an instructor there with you in the room, but having to use your voice as the main guide to guide through the lessons. But just the camaraderie from the group of having everybody in the class. Sometimes we'd forget that we're not actually in the same room, because we would just have the same kind of interaction and fun that we usually would in the classroom. So it's been amazing. We all look forward to meeting up together on the days when we have our classes. It's like we're getting together in one huge virtual community.
Well, I'm glad to hear things have been going so smoothly for you, because just in general, I hear a lot of the hiccups and technical snafus of having to go to Zoom and bring everything online and virtual. So I'm glad it's been going smoothly in your specific format.
So far, we've not had any problem, right, Philip?
Right, I
We've
guess.
not had any problems.
Certainly don't want to jinx you there, but
No.
I'm glad to hear it's been going smoothly.
Yes.
But that's really great, and again, that's really the beauty of technology and how it can assist in things. And I know, obviously technology, Philip, I'm sure has served your process. Is there anything you'd like to talk about specifically around technology or certain technology that you use now that you weren't using before?
So I would say definitely technology has been great. I mean, I was always good with the computer and using the phone, but now pretty much just, well, dealing with Helen Keller, they showed me how to use a lot of the assistive technology and the different there's so many different tools. There's like for me that works best with me with Zoom text, and um, there's also JAWS as well as Fusion. So there's different things that you can use as far as the computer wise that can assist you in that aspect. And then for everyday use is mainly the phones. Prior to joining the team program with Marcia, I was in foundations with Karen Barrett and a couple of other instructors, and they brought in some individuals from like maybe that deal with Android, like as well as Apple, and they talked about using the smartphones and the type of technology that's already pretty much built in.
Mhm.
Now, for someone like me that doesn't really, like I have some sort of vision, I would say, I find it easier um, just using like the Google Assistant, or maybe just like I have a Samsung, so Samsung now has their own assistant as well. I think it's called Bixby. So I pretty much use between those two, I'm able to navigate with my phone and tell the phone what to do and in that aspect. So the smartphone is what I pretty much use for everything. And then aside from that, I still have my computer.
Right.
Well, Doug,
Yes.
can there's a very important step that I missed.
Please.
After foundation, we have ATC training, and ATC is what Philip was referring to just now, where we help, we're introduced to adaptive technology that they can use. So he mentioned Zoom Tech and JAWS. Those are screen reader program that the visually impaired will use to read the screen. So of course, that's a whole other training that's also done at Helen Keller to make sure that you're able to use your computer, your iPhone, your Android, all your different equipment, and it helps you to identify which one is best suitable for you based on your particular need.
Right.
We have an amazing instructor. We have Joe De Niro, who is phenomenal. And he's quite a few of the students in my group were actually his students before they came to the team program.
So as we move into the last few minutes of our conversation here, we really did a great job of walking through step by step this process. But now that we've kind of, walked through the entirety of that process, Marcia, do you want to just take a moment to kind of reiterate, all of those steps together so that we can just put all those pieces together that we've talked through?
Sure. So if you need services for the blind, the very first thing we need to do is reach out to your New York State Commission for the Blind.
And then, of course, in other states,
other states, they have different ones.
Right.
In New York, the office is in Garden City. That's 516-564-4311. After that, you refer to Helen Keller. And at Helen Keller, based on your particular needs, there are varying services that you will be provided with. Our office in Hempstead, you can reach out to our director there, Rosanna Federo, and the number there is 516-485-123, extension 6606. of course, just like Philip, you'll have someone coming to your home to deal with vision rehab, where you'll get your bump dots, you'll get your special equipment that will help you to maneuver using the devices, your appliances in your home. You'll have orientation and mobility services, where you learn to move safely within your home and also within the community. You'll, of course, learn how to get to Helen Keller, where you'll start working on adjustment to blindness with our phenomenal social workers, Liz Sergi and Alana Garone. You'll also, if you need to learn to keyboard, which is vital, we have keyboarding classes which are taught. We have different instructors there who will teach you how to keyboard. You will need that to use your computer before you can get into foundations and team. And of course, we have ATC also, which is a big part of the process before you get into any kind of work readiness program. So that's basically the steps that are involved in the services that we provide. If I've forgotten any, be sure to go to our website and you can see exactly what else we have to offer. Our website, of course, is www.helenkeller.org.
Excellent. Thank you for walking through that. I think it's really helpful to just hear all the pieces, together, which you articulated so well there. So with our last couple minutes here, I have two last questions for you, Philip. Mm-hmm. The first being, what are your goals for the future?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, my goals, my major goal is to get back into my master's program and see if I can continue and finish that. I know I had a couple of courses left in that prior to me losing my vision. So that definitely is a goal. And then, of course, getting back out there and working. I worked for a long time. I worked since I was 13. I started off doing summer programs, and then as I was 18, I pretty much started working full time. And throughout my high school and college career, I worked. And so just getting back out into the workforce and is definitely my biggest goal now.
And the final question is, for anyone who is maybe watching now or someone that might come to this conversation later, who maybe is in a similar boat to you, maybe they are in the early stages of losing their vision. What advice or what would you like to say to them directly, specifically to those people?
Well, the best advice I can give to anyone that is losing their vision or having any vision issues at this time, if I was in a situation where I was having vision issues, I would definitely have reached out and started getting some sort of assistance prior to me losing my vision completely. Mm-hmm. But I mean, for me, I know my situation's different and it was kind of just sprung on me. But definitely, if you're having any vision issues, don't be afraid or ashamed in any way. Reach out, and there's help everywhere. You have a lot of options out there, and definitely if you're here, you can reach out to Helen Keller. There's a lot of different things that can assist. It could be something as simple as maybe you just need a stronger prescription, or going as far as to say coming in to Helen Keller and getting the assistance that you need, but don't be ashamed. There's assistance.
I think Philip muted his thing. I think we muted.
Yeah.
Philip, I think you muted your thing.
Yeah, there we got you. Oh, wait.
Okay.
Yeah, we got you now, Philip. I think if you could just say that last couple sentences, I think it muted by accident. If you want to just
what I was
saying, the last couple sentences
was definitely, if you need the help, it's available. It's out there. Mm-hmm. Don't be ashamed. There's no shame in getting assistance. I'm seeing it now. I was always the type of person that never really needed help to do things. I could always handle it on my own, or I'll find a way. now pretty much it's okay to accept help,
Right.
you know, especially if it's going to get you to the next step in life.
That's a really great message, and definitely a perfect message to end this episode on. And I think, you know, that certainly applies to specifically to, you know, the sudden blindness that you experience or anyone experiencing vision loss. And I think is also a resonant theme now for everyone who's collectively dealing with a world that is changed, and really not being afraid to reach out if you need help. And really, sometimes we're gifted with a support system. Sometimes we need to be a little bit more active in seeking that out. But I think that's a great message to end on today. So on that note, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, thank you so much to Marcia Hamilton from Helen Keller Services for the Blind for joining us and really filling in a lot of the details about, you know, what that process is and what all the of kind of walking through all the steps of the services that the organization provides, and for Philip joining us today. And really want to thank you for speaking so openly about your personal experience. I think that really it's the honesty and openness with which you tell your story that I think not only really resonates with people who are going to watch this and who are watching live, but also I think is what really helps anyone who's coming to this who might be in a similar position to you. So thank you so much for sharing in a really open and honest way. Thank you, of course, to our interpreters, Jamie and Aaron, to our captioner, Laura. And that concludes episode 3 of Feeling Through Live. And we look forward to joining you again next week. And again, if you, anyone who's watching, if you have any questions that you weren't able to ask during this broadcast, feel free to write in the comments and we will try to get to all of those. So again, thank you, everyone, and look forward to coming back next week.